Hi, my name is Irene Weinberg, and I have a really special story to share with everyone. I was a very traditional woman, married to the love of my life for going on 18 years, did not believe in spirituality at all. We were very traditional in our beliefs, in our Jewish beliefs, and I even had a sister-in-law who fancied herself to be very spiritual, who my husband and I thought was out of her mind. Until one day, I was washing dishes at my kitchen sink, and my husband was watching a Jets game in our family room on TV, and I suddenly got a strong message that was in no way from my experience, from my head, from anything. And the thought was, it felt like a thought. It said, Saul has to go. Many lessons will be learned from his death. I thought to myself, what the heck am I thinking? This is crazy. I filled a glass of water. I brought it to my husband. I kissed the top of his head and I pushed it out of my mind. I said, this is nuts. And 6 months later, well, actually it wasn't 6 months later, 2 months later, we were on the New York State Thruway coming home from a ski weekend. We were skiers, and we had been driving about an hour and a half, and I felt our car go into a huge swerve. We were going 72 miles an hour. We were in the left lane. And as the car went into the swerve, I looked over at my husband, and I saw that Saul was sound asleep at the wheel. And I called out to him. I said, Saul. And he woke up. He saw what was happening. He went to pull the car out of the swerve. And as he did, we rose up into the air for the first of 4 flips. And as we rose for the first flip, I got another message. And it came into my head and it said, he's not going to make it, you are. We flipped 4 times, very hard each time on the right side. And subsequently, I needed 4 operations on the right side of my body, but I was conscious through everything. And as we're flipping and hitting hard each time, I pulled myself in like a little ball. And eventually, we ended up upside down on the side of the road. And I look over at Saul and I go, Saulie, are you okay? And I see that his entire personality, the beautiful essence of who he was, has completely left his body. And I am I'm upside down next to the shell of my husband. I thought to myself in the moment, oh my God, I was told that he was gonna go. And I got in that moment, something is up and there is more. And I even had the sense that he was with me somehow. And with all of this thought, I suddenly saw a helicopter landing in front of me. We held up traffic on the thruway for 2.5 hours, and a helicopter landed in front of me, and 3 EMTs jumped out of the helicopter, and they began to rock my car and get the car back on the road. And one of them stuck his hands through the shattered window of my car. I'll never forget it. Undid my seatbelt, grabbed me by my shoulders, turned me around, and started pulling me through the window of my car. And as I was sliding through that window, a male voice, and I tell women, I wish I could tell you it was a female voice, but I'm told it was probably a spirit guide, or maybe because my concept was that at the time God is male, which is not something I've evolved past that idea now. But whatever it was a male voice, and it boomed, and it was a voice, and it boomed into my head, and it was very like a heavenly directive and very kind of authoritative, very like matter of fact. And the message was, be loving and kind to everyone, as these EMTs were laying me on the side of the road. And I'm like, first of all, that's quite a message to get when you know your husband is gone next to you. You don't know yet that you're bleeding to death. I needed 2 blood transfusions later. I had 4 surgeries. But I'm saying to myself, I've been given a directive from heaven. It took me so aback that it changed my whole persona. Instead of screaming for myself or, oh my God, the love of my life is gone or whatever is going on, I'm saying, I have to be loving and kind to all of these people. And I started saying, as they loaded me into the helicopter, I said to the EMTs, what are your names? Thank you for coming out. It's the weekend before Christmas. I'm very grateful for you to help me. As they flew me to an emergency trauma center in Poughkeepsie, New York, I get to the emergency trauma center and the surgeon comes over to me and he said, I need to tell you that your husband is gone. And how do you want me to react? The police are going to your children and all of that. And I said to him, you know, Doc, I know my husband's gone. And I am the luckiest woman in the world that I was blessed to have him for the time that I did. I absolutely had the sense that he was there and that there was so much more up, and I was told to be loving and kind. And this is what I did. Even to the point that when they brought my stepdaughter in and she looked over me looking for her father, I told my doctor, I said, let me tell the kids. And I said to my stepdaughter, honey, I need to tell you Daddy's gone. And she fainted right away. And when they picked her up, I said, honey, just so you know, I love you and I will never hurt you. And she looked at me, she said, I know. And she ran out of the room to tell her husband what had happened. And through the entire experience, my consciousness was so changed to not focus on me and to focus on everyone who was helping me, that 3 months after my experience in that operating room, I got a call from the surgeon's assistant, and she said to me, you need to know that you changed lives in the emergency room that night. I had to call you and tell you. After the surgery, and also my sister-in-law, who was the spiritual one who we thought was crazy, she came to visit me and she said to me, Irene, everything about you changed that day. When I went to see you in the hospital, you were not the same person that I had known. There was something so transformed about you. You were like transformed. She said it was amazing to me, and I didn't understand until later when I heard your story what had happened to you, but I knew that something dramatic had happened to you. Well, 3 days after she saw me, I was in the hospital for 3 days, I came home, and now I was in grieving hell. Saul had real estate deals that were in the middle of being completed. They all fell in my lap. I had a hostile partner who I inherited all kinds of different problems. And 6 weeks after the accident, I got a call from my dry cleaner. Now, anyone watching this video can tell I'm very friendly. I talk to everybody, and I would come in and say hi to my dry cleaner, but who knew? When he called me, he said, Irene, I want to tell you something. You seem like you're a very open-minded person, and I don't tell this story to most people, but I feel compelled to tell you that 8 years ago, my wife and I lost our oldest son to a drug overdose, and we were inconsolable. We went to all these grief specialists and all these psychologists and all these people, and no one could help us until we found out that the soul goes on to the other side. He said, and we have seen, and he started reeling off these people that they had seen, and he said, and he started telling me about proof, evidence that they had received that their son was with them, and he was on the other side. And he said, in 2 weeks, we're going to see someone who's going to be very famous one day. And if you come with us, it's not even going to cost you anything. And I had no idea what he was talking about, but I knew something was up because I had gotten the messages. This medium, who I'm going to tell you who it was in a minute, this medium said to me, I'm getting a message from a man who's talking about Dr. Pepper. Does anyone relate to Dr. Pepper? And I said to my dry cleaner, Joel, start writing. Oh my God, it's Saul. 15 years before he met me, Saul's brother, who was a big advertising executive on Madison Avenue in New York City, put Saul's name in a Dr. Pepper commercial, And the blurb was, Dr. Pepper is coming east from California. Let's talk to the man in the street, Saul Weinberg, about what he thinks about Dr. Pepper. There was no doubt in my mind that this was Saul. There was no way this man could conjure up Dr. Pepper out of the blue. And now, for 40 minutes, Saul came through. He's telling me he died in a different state than where you live. He died in New York. We lived in New Jersey. He's telling me you were on a ski weekend. He's telling me you're wearing his skier charm under your blouse. He's telling me that he used to like to tell jokes with different accents, which he did. He's telling me he wore a lot of hats. He was going bald and he used to wear baseball caps all the time. I need to tell you now that the name of this man, this medium, was the very, very famous John Edward, before he was famous, with only 35 people in the room. After this amazing reading by John Edward, there were only 2 people who I could call to share the miracle, the amazing thing that had happened to me. One was my sister-in-law, who Saul and I thought was crazy. And she said, thank God, because 2 weeks after the accident, Saul came through to me and gave me these messages about each of the kids and about business deals you're struggling with. And there was even a message about one of the business deals that I was having a problem with. And so now I'm starting to talk to her. And of course, I told my mom, who was not sure this was real, but okay. And that was it. Everything because I knew everyone else in my world was like I had been and thought this was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And I wasn't going to tell them, but I was getting undeniable proof that Saul was on the other side and something was up. So now I started opening up to the spiritual world. And I started going to other mediums. And every single one of them started channeling information from Saul. And I started getting the message, not from 1, not from 2, but from 4 or 5 of them, that there's a divine plan and that Saul and I have been around the block together. We're soulmates. We've been around the block quite a few times in different lifetimes. And that if certain things didn't work out for him in this lifetime, he might have to leave early and work with me from across the veil. At that point, I didn't even know what across the veil meant, really, but I knew it was Saul. And I started getting word. I started being told, you're supposed to write a book. I said, book? What kind of book? I played the violin growing up. I was a buyer for Macy's. I was in retail. I helped him with his real estate business. I took honors English in school, but what book? Well, it was him. So now I'm talking to my sister-in-law and she says, oh, I can help you with this person I know who it channels from the other side. She's in Massachusetts. She's a healer. And I found myself making an appointment with this woman. No one in my world knew about it other than my sister-in-law. And I made this appointment and I went to Massachusetts, and this woman had a healing cabin in Massachusetts. And I walked into her healing cabin and Saul came through right away. And the woman started telling me about the accident, about different things that had happened. And she said again, I'm being told you're supposed to write a book. And I'm being told I'm supposed to help you with this book. One thing led to another, and I started working with her. And I was still going on complete faith. I would think of questions to ask and whatever. And in those days, we recorded them on these little tape cassettes, or she would write on her computer. And I still had a healthy skepticism as I was working with her, but again and again and again, honey, it's me. I'm telling you, it's me. I'm here. Anyway, she started channeling he started telling her past lives that we had had together. I asked him what it was like for him to cross over. I asked him what they did about people who were evil. I asked him about, do they have a hell there? What's going on there? All different kinds of questions, soulmates. And I started compiling all this information and crafting it, because I was told I was supposed to write a book, crafting it into a story, into a book. And I called it They Serve Bagels in Heaven, because one of the scenes he told me is when you cross over to the other side, you're given a visual that makes you very comfortable before you're turned over for your life review and all that goes on there. And his visual was his mother, who had died when he was 16, met him on the other side and created a visual for him where they were having bagels and coffee in heaven. And for those of you who say, well, did they come with lox and cream cheese? Because I get asked that question. Anything you want is fine there. But I tell people all the time, page 8 for the book, it's all about that. Now I get all this information, and I was out there with the book. I wrote the book, I was out there with it. People were responding beautifully to it, and I thought this was what I was supposed to be doing. This was the result of the messages and everything. And one day I was sitting, and remember, I got those messages during the accident, but I'm not the type of person who gets all this other information. And one day I was sitting at my desk, and all of a sudden the word podcast came into my head. And I literally said to my publicist, what's a podcast? Because I'm a baby boomer. I didn't have any idea what a podcast was. And she said, oh, I can help you do that. Now I'm thinking to myself, I'm getting a message. This is my next step. Okay, who am I going to interview? I'm supposed to interview people for a podcast. The other thing I thought about during the accident, besides getting the message, be loving and kind to everyone, was as they pulled me out of the car, my earthbound thought was, I will get through this somehow, because I have to, my husband Saul was buried on my son's 21st birthday. And the other thing I thought about was, I will get through this somehow because I have to show my son that you can get hit by a grenade in life and still keep going. So right in the midst of the accident, with all of this stuff that was going on with me, I scripted myself that somehow I was going to get through this, and I was going to be able to come out on the other side of it. And so I worked with healers. Like I worked with an energy healer, I worked with a life transition coach. I was continuing to go with mediums to mediums and get these messages. And I thought, I'm going to interview grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and people who have been through tremendously hard things in life and come through to the other side, so that people know that this is part of your life experience and you don't have to be stuck in that swamp of suffering and grief, that you can learn and you can move through it. And that you are meant to continue to live and thrive. And the bottom line to all of this, I must say, is about 4 years after the accident, my son said to me one day, you know, Mom, there has been nothing worse than seeing you in total despair, and nothing better than seeing you be able to have joy again. And that is why my podcast is called Grief and Rebirth, Finding the Joy in Life.